So while people continue to roll on in from the waiting room, I'll just quickly cover kind of how these Yappy Hours work. So we do ask that you keep your mic muted for the first part at least, while I just kind of go over the topic briefly. And then we're going to open it up for Q&A as well, so that you can ask any questions you have about your dog's jumping, and we can kind of troubleshoot as a group together. Please feel free to share your video as well. Like I said, I love seeing puppy faces and getting to interact with you guys that way. This is being recorded for both audio and video. It will be posted on our YouTube. We had very many people actually ask if they would be able to watch it later, and so we're going to do that this time for this Yappy Hour. If you prefer not to be seen or heard on that recording, you can always just use the chat function, which is down in the middle of the screen on the bottom. You should see a little chat button. You can ask your questions there, and then you can keep your camera turned off as well if you don't want to be on camera for the recording. So like I mentioned, today we're going to go over briefly the overall jumping and what we try to do to teach dogs not to jump. I am doing it a little different for this Yappy Hour in that I am going to show you some video of some jumping dogs, and I'm going to walk you through the process that I go through as a trainer to build a training plan for that behavior and for that family and what they're working on. And what's great is you'll get to see the jumping dogs. We'll talk about what we could do in that situation, and then you can think about how you can apply that to your home and your lifestyle. And then you'll actually get to see, I got video earlier today of those same dogs in their first training session starting to implement some of the things that I suggested. So you'll get to see progress, which is always so nice to see. I did want to make sure that everyone knew about our Puppy Essentials workshops, which started a month or two ago. I don't know time anymore. So you know, whenever those started, every day is the same. But we do have these, they're ongoing. We offer potty training, nipping and biting, socialization foundations is my newest workshop. But we also have all about barking for puppies of all ages, and crate training. So the workshops are really small group sessions, really personalized feedback where we walk through the specific things that you're dealing with in those topics. And as a thank you for joining us today in Yappy Hour, we wanted to extend a $10 off coupon for all of our Yappy Hour participants for any of the Puppy Essentials workshops through the end of September. So that code is Yappy10. You'll get that included in your follow-up email as well after Yappy Hour ends tonight. Okay. Make sure we got everyone in the waiting room. Fantastic. Thank you, Mia, for doing that for me. And feel free in the chat to say hello, tell me your dog's name and their age, and then I'll also be calling out some questions in the beginning here that you can respond via chat to let me kind of know what your dog is doing, and then I can make sure that I'm addressing that as well when we're talking about what to do. So, jumping. It is one of the most common problem behaviors, especially for puppies, but not just for puppies. I often see puppies start jumping on people when they're young and they're cute, and they get away with it. And then they become this, 100-pound lab that is jumping in your face and knocking you over, right? So it's not cute when they're older. And oftentimes it's paired with other problem behaviors like nipping and biting. This is really common with puppies, especially when they're teething. But when they grow up into adults, if they're still jumping and nipping and biting, that can be really scary for a lot of people that might not be comfortable around dogs or scared of dogs, and they can get knocked over. But it's not just the big dogs that jump either. Small dogs jump too, and they often get away with it because we're like, well, you're tiny. Like, you're just jumping on my leg, no big deal. But I have had clients who are like, this is a problem because I am tripping and falling as I'm walking in the door and my dog's getting up all on me, or I'm scared of hurting my dog because they get underfoot. And it's also just kind of rude, right? For a little dog to be jumping on someone, especially if that person doesn't really appreciate it and doesn't find it quite cute. So we want to teach our dogs, no matter their age or size, that jumping doesn't work. So the thing with jumping too is that dogs jump because they're excited and they want attention And what does jumping usually get your dog? Attention, right? We usually go, no, 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 off, 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 right? And your dog goes, ah, you touched me and you talked to me and now you're engaged with me and let's do something else, right? And then they might start playing, right? It can be a way to initiate play, jumping, right? And so they just got reinforced and rewarded for the jump, meaning they're more than likely going to jump again in the future if they want your attention because it works for them, right? So even if we're giving a negative response in our minds, a get off, no, 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 right? For a lot of dogs, that's what they wanted. I grew up with Rottweilers, and if you did the old school version of kneeing them in the chest, they're like, woohoo, right? Like, let's party, like I'm ready to play, and they're big, right? So to teach them what to do instead is going to be our go-to training for jumping, right? So when I start talking about jumping with clients, I go about it in the same way I go about almost every training or behavior issue. And so trainers go through what's called the ABCs. We go through what's called antecedents, the A, which just means what in the environment or context is causing this behavior. So what is allowing it to happen? What's causing it to happen? For jumping, a common one is you're coming home and walking through the door, right? Another one could be you're out on a walk, your dog wants to greet someone, they're happy, they're excited, and they jump, right? So those are the antecedents, the things that precede the behavior, right? That environment. The B of the ABCs is the behavior itself. So jumping up is the behavior. And we think about what can we teach the dog to do instead in that situation that they're in, right? Because that leads to a new consequence, right? Consequence drives behavior. So dogs will jump because it gets them attention, right? So what do we teach them instead to get attention, right? So we teach an alternative and incompatible behavior. The go-to for most people when they're working with a jumping dog is sit, right? It's an easy one to see, right? Usually dogs will stay there for a split second. Some dogs are like pogos, they'll sit and then like be right back in the air right away. But it's a really easy one to notice and mark and reward. But in all honesty, you guys, I will take 4 paws on the floor, right? If I have a serial jumper I'm working with, and they might not know sit quite yet, or they just can't hold it long enough for me to really mark it and reward it in time, then I will take 4 paws on the floor as an alternative behavior. So don't think that you have to have some fancy cue in your pocket with your dog to work on jumping. 4 on the floor, it's simple, and we can build on it, right? And eventually get to sit for attention. But until we get there, let's just stand nicely for attention, right? So pick a behavior that you want your dog to do instead of jumping. And that's going to give them the consequence, a good consequence of attention, right? So ABCs, you're gonna work through this with me when I start this video showing you the baseline, the beginning of 2 dogs jumping. And we're gonna talk about, well, how are we gonna set up the environment a little bit differently to prevent jumping? What behaviors can we reward instead of jumping, right? And then the consequence for those behaviors is something good because we want our dog to keep choosing to do it. And the more you reinforce a behavior, the more your dog will do it because it works for them, right? We're the same way. We keep doing things because it works for us. So I want to play you the baseline video of 2 dogs. See if I can open it up here. I call these the jumping pain points. And so you might recognize some of these environments. And in the chat, let me know where your dog's jumping pain point is, right? Where in the home they tend to jump the most, or what activity is going on that causes them to jump. It might be while on a walk, greeting new people. These are just the 3 pain points that these dog owners identified. I love those dogs. That's Clover and Finnegan. I have been jumped on them before. And with Finnegan, he's an adolescent. He's not a puppy anymore, but he nips. I don't know if you could see in that last part in the backyard. Clover as well. She's an adult, but they both start to nip when they get overexcited and overstimulated when they're jumping. So it's not a fun experience, right? I've gotten raped by Finnegan before, and I'm like, this is no fun. We have to fix this, right? So let's go through this. I'm going to share my screen again. Let me get back to the beginning part of this video because I want you to look at the environment, because the first thing I look at as a trainer is the antecedents, the environment that create the behavior. Let me share this again. There we go. So if they are jumping at the front door, what are some things that we could do to prevent jumping at the front door? Go ahead and put some ideas into chat. What pops in your head of, how do I keep the dog from jumping on me when I walk through the door, right? Probably the easiest one is you could put up a dog gate, right, or a baby gate. Exactly, Deborah, gate up, yeah. So they could maybe put a gate in front of the door in that little hallway. That prevents the dog from actually making contact with you, going through the window. Great idea, Eileen. Although I could see these dogs being like, you're in the window, and then they jump out the window. Yes, so creating a barrier to prevent the behavior from being reinforced is my first goal. Because if it ever accidentally does get rewarded, right, then they're gonna take longer to learn not to jump, right? And then I'm getting annoyed and frustrated. So unless I am ready to train it and I'm consistent, I am going to set up a barrier. Great one, Carolyn, leash them. Leashing is a great one if you have someone to help, which here she was videoing. So she's like, I'm no help to you right now. But you can have someone on, hold them on leash, especially helpful for when guests are coming over and you're ready to train, right? If you have guests over and you just want to hang out and enjoy your evening with your friends, you can put your dog in their crate if they're happily crate trained and do well in a crate, or their puppy pen, or a separate room, a safe space for them where they have something awesome to do and are hanging out and they're not jumping on people, right? So you're not letting them practice the bad behavior. But when you're wanting to actively train it, you have to set up the environment so that they don't get to jump on someone right when they walk through the door. So a gate is great. Having them on leash further back in the room is great. Or even in a pen further in the room where you can practice approaching from a distance. So it's not right at the front door. Another option here, and I like to have people think about how they can train proactively and preemptively. In some homes, the setup doesn't allow you to put up a gate by the front door or the entryway. Freestanding gates are great. I use a freestanding gate, but I also have corgis, so they're not big dogs that could knock it over. What you can do instead is put a jar of treats before you walk in the door. So maybe out on the front patio, you hang up a mason jar on the side of the wall, or you have a little table out there, or you keep treats in your car. Grab them when you're about to walk in, because then you have something to get your dog's attention and then start to practice the alternative behavior that we want them to do instead. So that's going to set you up for success. So rather than keeping treats there on that little table in the entryway, keep them before you walk in the door, right? In your car, out on the patio. There's lots of DIY things on like Pinterest and stuff of creating little wall hanging treat jars and leash holders and stuff. So I love having those where I need them. I like to set myself up for success. So great call on the gates here or the leash as you guys go. The next thing I want to think about is what behavior do I want them to do instead? So that B of the ABCs. Sit, like I mentioned earlier, perfect behavior. But can you guys let me know in chat any other behaviors that might come to mind other than sit and 4 on the floor that might work to prevent jumping? What can they be doing that's incompatible with jumping on you? Any ideas? Great. Yep, fetch, get your toy. I love this one. Retrievers Love this, I swear. Go to place is one of my favorites. Great, Sue. Touch is fantastic as well. Yeah. Yeah, and touch is a great way. So touch is where they touch their nose to a hand or like another target stick or something. And that keeps their nose further down because you can lower your hand down and keeps them from jumping up. Lay down is another one, right? So if your dog has one of these favorite cues that they have lots of practice with and lots of fun reinforcement history, then you can use that as your substitute for jumping, right? And then it just comes down to repetition, right? Practicing in the environment they jump the most. So building new reinforcement history in the environment you need it in, right? Yeah, good question, Lisa. So hasn't heard of go to place. How do you teach that? That could be its own Yappy Hour. It is one of my favorite cues. All it is teaching the dog, go to a specific place, most often a dog bed or a training mat or a crate. You can use a crate or a pen. I'm teaching my puppy go to pen, and he loves it because that's where all of his food happens. But it teaches them to go there on cue, and you can make it part of the routine of when you come home or when someone comes through the door, they automatically know, oh, someone walked through the door, I'm gonna run over here and lay down, and this is where the chicken falls from the sky, right? As long as I'm on this mat, awesome, right? And then when I'm released, I get to go say hi, and I'm already a little bit calmer. But that's a great question, and I will include a resource about how to teach go to place in our follow-up email as well if you wanted to start on that. It's a great one. Okay, so we talked about the A, the environment, right? The antecedents. Then we talked about the behavior. The unwanted behavior is replaced with the wanted behavior. Sit, spin is a good one, touch, go to place, whatever it might be, right? That's incompatible with jumping. Consequence. Usually you don't have to think of a negative consequence for your dog if you're doing A and B right, right? The consequence is actually a positive reinforcement for your dog because if they sit, we reward them with a treat at first. Treats will help you focus your dog when they are excited, right? So when you first start teaching this incompatible behavior, use food treats, right? If your dog is not food motivated, I have yet to meet a dog who is not food motivated. Use toys, retrievers, especially for the fetch, right? But if your dog loves to hold a toy, use that toy. Play tug as the reward. Play fetch as the reward, right? Use what your dog loves, but treats are going to be really powerful for this. That's the new consequence for not jumping is you get a treat and you also get my attention, right? And that attention is so important to give when they're doing something right. So often I see this happen. A dog's jumping, and we're like, oh, I'm supposed to ignore it, right? Which you are supposed to ignore it. We'll talk about that in a minute. But if we never tell them what does work, it's gonna be a long time before they stop trying to jump on you, right? And this is what we call an extinction burst. Some trainers say, oh, just ride the extinction wave, right? The more a dog does a behavior and it doesn't have the consequence they want when previously it did, what we see is the behavior get worse and worse and worse and then stop because they're like, well, it's not working. Any mother I know knows what I'm talking about because kids are like, mom, 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 mom. And eventually if mom never responds, then they go and find dad. That's usually what they do. So you can ride the extinction burst with jumping, but it's very hard. So instead, I want to make sure that once they stop jumping, I go, yes, here's my attention. Or yes, here is a treat on the floor, right? Some dogs might need help. You might need to use that treat to guide them into a sit, right? You're gonna see a video in a little bit about, with a group class of mine practicing automatic sits for greeting. You'll see how they do that. But you can use a treat to lure them into the position you want. Yes, give the treat and then hello, hi, nice to see you after a long day. So they do get what they want, but they had to do something else to get it, right? So make sure you're rewarding the behavior that you want. And attention really is one of the top thing that dogs usually jump for. There are other reasons, anxiety, fear, sometimes different body language, right? It's not the bouncy pogo stick dog. But almost always I see a dog jumping because they're like, this gets me you and I want you. So if you don't have treats on you, right, and your dog starts jumping, think about what am I going to reward with? Myself, my attention. So I'm either going to ignore it, right? But watch out the side of your eye the minute 4 are on the floor where they sit, good job, and reward with that attention. You want your dog to know what to do, not just what not to do, right? Any questions about that? Ignoring versus rewarding? It's a tough one, I think. Okay. So we went through that. Let's look at the back door. Pop in the comments here what you think they should do at the back door for the antecedent, for setting up that environment. I see an option in the screen here of something they can put up. Gate, yes, Deborah, nice. So this little X pen on the right side there, that is a great little barrier they can set up, right? It also sets you up for a good training opportunity. The other thing you can do, so other than just ignoring the jumping, standing there and waiting until they're not jumping, you can provide a consequence of, if you jump on me, I go away. And this is called negative punishment. So I take away something the dog likes and enjoys, my attention and my presence, to make jumping decrease in frequency, right? That's actually a great point, Lisa. Close the curtains if they bark so they can't look. That's a great point, especially for alert barking. If you have an alert barker, join me for a Puppy Essentials workshop on barking. So you put up the gate, you walk through the door, right? They can't successfully get on you when jumping, but if they jump, too bad, you walk back out the door, right? So you go further away if they jump. That's a consequence, right, for jumping, okay? The gate provides some protection, right? Protected contact, we call it. A lot of zoo trainers use protected contact when they're working with dangerous animals. So having gates in between things. So you have that protected contact. You can then practice reapproaching. And if they don't jump, make sure to reward it, right? Toss some treats on the floor, scatter treats on the floor. So then they're busy sniffing. So then they don't just jump right back on you again, right? But again, remember, attention is also what they want. So you can also use attention there. And then you can reward continued 4 on the floor or continued sit with actually coming in and entering, right? This can take some back and forth when you first start. So don't get discouraged, because it can take a little bit for your dog to relearn a new behavior and a new habit and start to understand the consequences of their behaviors now, right? Take some repetition. So you're all right. The gate here can be pulled in. Sit is going to be these 2 dogs' alternative behavior, right? And then that consequence I just talked about, if they do jump, the consequence is he can walk out the door, right? He can leave. The hard one, I think, I'm gonna scrub forward here, is jumping in the yard. So what's great, we already have a barrier set up. So there's a nice little barrier that you can use to prevent them actually jumping on you. But it's when he gets into the yard that it is a problem. It's not easy to get out again, right? Sit, like I mentioned, is going to be the alternative behavior, right? And then the consequence right now for them is they are getting attention and they're actually getting more excited. They're jumping and they're nipping and it's fun. It's almost self-reinforcing for them, okay? So we went through those videos, ABCs for each one. Any questions about those before we go to see what they look like after their first training session? Jennifer's a great question. Is it better to work with 1 dog at a time or both because they're a pack? I prefer to work with 1 at a time first to help that dog focus and really build up the behavior and be successful before adding in a whole nother distraction of another dog. And they will feed off of each other's excitement. They're like, you're jumping, I'm jumping, right? Let's just jump on each other and then let's both jump on mom or dad at the same time. So you can definitely work 1 at a time, but sometimes depending on the context, like if they're hanging out in the yard together, take advantage of the training opportunity. It just takes a little bit more attention from us to make sure that we're watching both and rewarding both when we need to be. Good question, Donna. What was the C in the backyard, the consequence? Right now, their consequence is they get to jump on him, right? So jumping is fun. You can see them feeding off the excitement and starting to nip. He does a really good job here of actually ignoring it, right? But it's not stopping their jumping, right? They're amped up, right? Their brain is already like, woohoo, right? I can't think about anything else. The consequence we want is Alternative behavior of sit gets you actual attention. So a better consequence for you, right? Reinforcement instead of ignoring. Right? So let me get to the new video. Maybe. I love technology so much. There we go. Okay, so this is after, I think it's the first 2 like training repetitions that they did, starting to implement management of the environment, so changing the A up a little bit, but especially focusing on the new incompatible behavior, right, which is sit. Now, what's great is these 2 dogs are familiar with a clicker, so you will hear a clicker. That click is telling them what you're doing right now is what's getting you this treat, right? So I had asked them, I said, you know, keep some treats in the car, bring your clicker with you because they're clicker trained, it's gonna help, right? It's gonna teach them faster. And then when you treat, I want you to toss the treats to them, but if you can, scatter them in the grass, right? And you'll see here why, because they're actually they're gonna start to catch the treats in the air. And we'll talk about why we wanna tweak that a little bit, but you'll see how fast they learn new behavior. And I'm going to pause it here because I don't think you guys can hear me when the video is playing. If you notice, one of them jumps up onto the side of the driveway there. He turns and walks away. That's a consequence. If you're going to jump up on the side, I'm going to turn and leave, right? So that was perfect.
Sit. Good girl. Good girl. Good boy. Sit. Good girl. Good boy. Good girl. Good piece. Good piece. Yeah. All right. Sit. Sit.
Okay, before the next repetition, what I love is that he kept them busy with repeated cues of the sit, right? So that way they don't go, okay, I sat, I got my treat, and oh, Dad's here. I'm gonna jump again, right? And you saw, they started jumping and he was like, oh, right? And then asked for the sit and they gave it really fast because they were like, oh, that gets me something good and your attention. What I love too is he gave attention as well as treats. So it's starting to build up that new habit, and then that will help fade out the clicker and treats in the long run, which is the eventual goal, right? Also, what we want to see happen with practice is your dog starts to anticipate when you come into the yard, I don't even need you to tell me to sit. I am going to start sitting on my own because that's what has worked. And so I'm just going to skip that whole part of the process where you have to tell me something, and I'm going to get my treat and my attention faster. That's what we're building up to, where our dogs are predicting what we want and giving us good behavior, right? So that was the first repetition with the new one, and then I'll play the second one here for you as well.
Good boy. Good boy. Good girl.
So if you guys saw there, Finnegan made a really good choice. He was about to jump, and then he was like, no, I'll do this. Instead, I'll sit because it got me something last time. So it was great to see him learning, actively thinking about, if I want another click and treat, what do I have to do? He didn't even have to be asked. He just offered it. That's what we want to build up to. It just takes repetition, right? So that we set our dogs up for success by making it so they can't jump on us. And then also teaching them what does work, right? And then the new consequence for sitting or keeping 4 paws on the floor is treats and attention and all the good stuff, right? Toy play if your dog's into toy play. I mentioned earlier that I recommend actually tossing treats to the floor with a jumping dog because I don't know if you noticed with Finnegan and Clover, the 2 dogs there, when he tossed to the air, they popped up to eat it, right? So one, they broke their sit, and then they were technically jumping when they were eating the treat, which timing of the actual treat in their mouth is important, even if you're clicker training. But I want to really build that 4 paws on the floor and a sit, right? That's what's getting rewarded here. And I don't want to encourage any popping up out straight into a jump or things like that. Also, if your dog has a long history of jumping, most likely you'll walk through the door or into the yard or wherever it is, you'll reward a sit, and they might go right back to trying to jump on you. So if I scatter a treat on the floor, a couple treats on the floor, their nose is on the floor. So you have longer of them not jumping, and then you can prepare for the next sit, right? Or you can just keep walking into your home, right? And put down the grocery bags and all the things you need to do. They're busy sniffing, right? So it's rewarding them for staying focused on the floor. And they know that treats usually happen down here. So I'm not going to keep jumping at your hand or jumping up into the air to catch it. So for those 2, that was the one tweak, because that was fantastic progress. And I said, hey, let's do one tweak here, scatter those treats on the ground to build up that look to the grass for your reward, right? Gives him a chance to actually get into the yard. Any questions about that video at all? Any questions about the process of teaching that incompatible behavior to jumping? Awesome, cool. One thing, no worries, Deborah. I'll talk to you later. One thing I want to talk about is greeting people out on walks or people coming into your home. So something with jumping is, I see this more often than I wish we did. I'm out with clients with puppies or adolescent dog, and they jump, and their owners are trying to tell people, because they want to socialize their dog too, right? That's really important. But their dog gets so excited and happy that they jump on everybody. And usually people, especially the ones who love dogs, so all of us, right? We go, oh, it's no big deal. It's fine. I'm a dog person, right? And then we touch the dog. We look at the dog, right? We talk to the dog. Or flip side, this is much less common. I have had people, when I'm working with a client, knee the dog for them and say, this is what you're supposed to do, which is not going to work. And it can actually ruin positive socialization opportunities with people they meet while out and about. Because, oh, I approach somebody and then I get kneed or smacked and people are bad. It's the last thing we want to do for dogs. So I really, really, really want to drive home the point with you guys that when you're practicing with meeting people, especially while out on leash, you have to advocate for your dog and set them up for success. And so if that means keeping them on leash all of the time, right? Not letting them have off-leash privileges and freedom, right? Or if someone, you're in, an off-leash area or, a secure large area and someone's like, oh, can I say hi to your dog? You call them to you, put them on leash and have them sit, because that leash gives you more control, right? And it helps prevent the jumping, okay? It also gives you a chance to educate that person of how they can help you. And honestly, most people are more than happy to help train, especially cute little puppies, but all dog lovers are like, oh yeah, I'll totally help. You can say, my dog's in training. We're really working on not jumping on people when greeting them, right? That's no fun. So have a treat. So if you have treats with you, give them a treat, right? Pass them one and say, can you ask my dog to sit for you before petting them and interacting with them? Or you can ask the dog to sit using a treat to reward, and then allow them to approach that person. If they start to jump up, redirect their attention, like, oh, sorry, and then turn and guide them the other way. This is, again, where treats come in handy because you put it in front of their nose and they're like, food, right? And they'll usually follow it, so you can add distance again. This is very similar to when he would back away when they were jumping at the fence in the yard. If they start to jump on somebody, nope, let's go this way, you lose that person. But if you can just hold it together long enough and approach politely and then sit, right, then you get that person. So it's all about teaching them that alternative behavior to get the thing they want, which is to greet that person, right? So it takes you have to advocate for your dog and your training, because if you have someone who's like, oh, it's no big deal, and they love on your dog when they jump on them, your dog just got reinforced for jumping, and it erases a lot of the training you've done, right? We see a lot of regression when one person in the family is okay with jumping and one person isn't. Well, that dog's like, I have no idea if I'm allowed to jump or not, right? So we want to make sure it's very clear for our dogs that jumping on people doesn't get you attention. It actually means you lose attention. But this is what we do instead. And I'm going to set up my environment having you on leash, behind a gate, so that you're successful and you're not able to jump in the first place, right? Any questions about greeting people on leash and jumping? Not so far. Pop them in the chat if you do. I do want to share this one video before we're going to open it up for Q&A. This is an exercise that I did with my group classes where we're teaching the puppies, it's an intermediate class, how to do an auto sit. So this is just building up the sit behavior so that the dogs learn, oh, when I approach somebody, I sit for attention rather than jumping. And these dogs, I think, were all teenage, I think. Yeah, none of them are young puppies. They're all teenagers. They're all off leash, as you'll see in the video. And the reason we have them off leash is because everyone's on the same page. We're in a training class. We've gone through the instructions of what do we do when a dog jumps on us. We turn and walk away because we're off leash too, right? So it's easy for us to turn and walk away. Or maybe we wait for a sit because sometimes the dogs just need to go, oh, right, that wasn't the thing to do. Or we help them into the sit with a lure, right? We show them what we want so that they get our attention in a treat. So that's why I have them all off leash. It's a controlled environment. Everyone's on the same page. So if you're having people help you, just make sure that they know what to do so that your dog's set up for success, and you can practice off leash in the home. But again, don't feel bad using barriers to prevent actual contact for the jumping, or you can tether them or have them on leash and in your hand. So let me share this video here. Watching this makes me miss all of my students. Good, she didn't jump that time. That was great. Good. Good. We're gonna do one more minute. Good.
You are my mom.
Good. You I've seen a bazillion times. Good. So, we're not all perfect all the time. There are I see the places in that video where I'm like, ooh, they accidentally rewarded that jumping a little bit. It's okay, right? They're still working on it. And you see the dog start to anticipate, oh, I'm about to jump, how about I sit? Because this got me a click and a treat, because it was a clicker training class. And you see the dogs also start to practice with more excited people. So what we had them do is towards the end of that exercise is the person got a little more excited. They were running a little bit, right? Happier voices to try to actually entice the jumping. And then we would see what the dog would do. So we do make it harder because we want our dogs to learn that no matter how excited that person is to see you, please don't jump up and bop them in the face, right? Sitting still works. So we have to build them up to that. It's going to be really hard for a dog when they're just starting to learn what to do instead of jumping, to have you get all excited and entice them to jump and then sit, right? They're probably going to jump and we set them up to fail. So start really calm and easy and then build them up to where you're patting your legs and you're getting excited and they're still doing the sit, right? You want to build them up to that eventual behavior. That's actually a good question for everyone. So I got a question in my chat. Do the dogs get confused with all the clickers going off? We don't really know, but in my experience, when I have dogs clicker training near each other, they're pretty good at knowing that whoever they're focused on, if that person clicks, that's who's giving them the treat. So if they're engaged with that person, like when I take my puppy to puppy class, we're all clicking for our dogs, but I don't see him alert to a click across the room. But who knows? Maybe they just learn that, like, that's just white noise. If you click, I get something. But good question. Yeah, Jane, she's asking just, is the meeting available for later viewing? No sound for the first half an hour. Yes, it will be on YouTube. So you will get that link to rewatch with sound because that will be much better. Good question, Sue. Will this all work if they're jumping on things and not people? Different, because jumping on things tends to be for a different reason. So we have to look at the ABCs. Why are they jumping? Are they counter surfing, right? Is there food on the counter, right? The behavior is jumping, and then the consequence for them, what is that, right? So are they jumping because they want to see out a window? The consequence for jumping up on the back of the couch is more access, right? They can see more, and then they can alert bark at things, right? So it depends. I go through what's the context, what's the environment that causes it, why are they doing it, and then how do I change the environment so that they're set up to not do the unwanted behavior, and then how do I practice an incompatible behavior. So for things like counter surfing, if they're jumping on the counter to search out food, then I make sure they don't have access to the room, right, when I'm not there to train. Or I make sure there's no food left on the counter and it's clean, so there's no crumbs, right? And then the alternative behavior might be forepaws on the floor. When I'm cooking, I am going to intermittently toss a treat to my dog just outside of the kitchen on the floor, right? This is where go to place is really good too. I will include the counter surfing resource in the follow-up email as well, because there's just some ideas and tips for that. You can teach a boundary, an invisible boundary for a dog as well, to prevent the jumping on the counter. For things like furniture, that is a little different as well. Dogs tend to jump on furniture because it's comfortable, right? The couch is usually much more comfortable than the floor. And we're up there too. So there is that attention component, right? And wanting to snuggle. If your dog likes to cuddle up with you, that's rewarding. So that's the antecedent, the behavior, the consequence. How do I set it up so that their bed on the floor is more comfortable, right? So that they choose their bed more often? Or do I keep them out of that room when I'm not there to keep them off the couch? I train go to bed as an alternative behavior, or I simply just reward being on the floor. More rewarding to hang out on the floor than it is on the couch, right? I also teach off, right? I teach them that getting off when asked is really rewarding. And that's nice for me when I'm just like, I need some room on the couch, you guys. Like, you move, tell my dog scoot over, right? So then she gets up and moves over. She's allowed on the couch. But if you don't want your dogs on the furniture, then you have to, one, be very consistent in managing the environment, rewarding alternative behaviors so that their new consequences. I lay on the floor and the stuffed Kong appears and it's awesome. So I'm going to choose the floor, right? That's probably one of the tougher ones. Is getting up on furniture. So usually I say, if you don't want dogs on the furniture, block access to that room when you're not there to manage it, because couches are comfy. So, great question. Any other questions right now about jumping? Because I think I covered everything that I can remember off the top of my head. Feel free to pop those questions into chat. And then also in Q&A time, we do open up the microphones too. So you can always explain more of what's going on with your dog, ask about what to do in your situation. And then if we don't have tons of questions about jumping on its own, then we can also take questions for other behaviors you might be dealing with. I might not be able to answer them as completely as I would want to in the last 10 or so minutes we have left, but I can definitely give you a head start. So, oh, also I'll show you my new puppy. Oh, this is Fozzie Bear. He is a cardigan Welsh Corgi, so his ears will eventually pop up. Oh my goodness, I know. So he's finally sleeping. If any of you have new puppies or just went through the puppy raising process, last night was really hard for me, so I feel your pain. I think I got an hour of sleep, and then he finally fell asleep right before this Yappy Hour, which is great. So keeping him awake at about 2 o'clock my time was the hardest thing, because I was like, you do not get to sleep right now. Like, you have to stay awake, and then you'll sleep during Yappy Hour. So he's had licky mats, he had a snuffle mat, we did a clicker training session before this, so that he'd be tired. And now he's like, why did you wake me up? So yeah, puppy raising is hard, but it's so worth it, right? Oh my goodness, okay, you can go back to bed. Yeah, good job. Da, 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 da. You're welcome, Lisa. Perfect. Tricky Vet also is another private question, but a good one for everybody. Are there resources to give to clients? I don't have time in the standard private to go through it all. Oh my God, I feel your pain. I'm assuming you are a trainer or a consultant. There are lots of resources, so I will try to find some for you that are they're applicable to everybody, but I'll try to find some like infographic style that's easy for people to read through quickly. Honestly though, for everybody, trainer or not, my goal is to get people thinking, small animal vet, awesome. I will look, Fear Free actually has a bunch, so I will look for you specifically. I'll find your email and I'll send those to you. I always try to get clients and dog owners to think about, what would a dog trainer do? How are they going to approach this problem? And it's almost always ABC, right? What's causing the behavior, right? What's in the environment is making it happen, allowing it to happen. What do I want them to do instead? What's the new consequence, right? And remember, consequence isn't always bad, right? I change the consequence from something that they might enjoy to something they enjoy better, right? So that's how I always try to get clients to think about it. So even if you just go through the, when does your dog jump the most? Front door, okay, well, let's think about, can you put up a gate, right? Can you maybe keep some treats on you in the car or right outside the door to then teach the dog, instead of jumping, let's try a sit. That's when you get a treat and some attention, right? Otherwise, crate train, use a pen, something like that. So you can just start with the easy stuff that they can do right away. Putting up a gate is a lot easier for some people to start with than to get right into the training right as you go. So, but yes, I will find some vet specific, like for vet clients to send you. Okay, our 7-month-old puppy always tries to pick up and sometimes eat stuff on the road. Yes. Do you have any advice on how to not get him to do those things? I know puppies eat everything super fast. My puppy's doing this on the patio. So a couple things you can do. You know that it's happening on walks because things smell great and they want to explore, and dogs smell everything. It's how they experience the world. So what do I want the dog to do instead while on walks? Look at me is a really good alternative to picking things up, right? So rather than working on leave it and always reacting to something that's about to happen that you don't want, I think about, my dog usually picks up all these rocks on this gravel part of the road. So while we walk there, I might walk further away from the gravel, or I'm going to get my dog's attention with their name. Good job. Let's stay over here with me. Keep looking at me. Good job. Here's another treat. Good job. What a good boy, right? And then we're past the gravel. So I prevented the behavior from happening, and I taught them to look at me while walking instead of keep their nose to the ground, right? Sometimes we see dogs grow out of the, I want to put everything in my mouth phase. Sometimes we don't. Some breeds are bred to put everything in their mouths. So we have to think about, how am I going to tackle this long term if my puppy doesn't grow out of it? Muzzle training is an option. I usually only do this if it's a serious behavior, like pica. If they're just eating everything, then I muzzle train so that they can't, because it can get very expensive at the vet if they're eating things and it's causing obstructions. And it's just dangerous all around. So I can prevent it with muzzle training. But again, a simpler behavior to teach that's incompatible is look up at me while we walk. And then when I know we're somewhere safer, just like in a little grass area that doesn't have rocks and twigs and things for you to eat, then I'm going to say, go sniff, and let them go sniff. And that's what they wanted. And they get that reward, right? So I play around with the ABCs, antecedent, right? On walks, what do I want them to do instead, right? And then the consequences, treats, attention, tug if they're toy motivated, but eventually getting to sniff where I know it's safe so they get that, which is what they wanted. Donna, you have such great questions. Let me see. Speaking of fear, what age do puppies start to exhibit fear? Macy has recently started barking at activity outside her front door, especially if the storm door is open and she can see out, right? And still dark this morning when I took her out to potty. She was nonstop barking and she was scared to be outside on her leash with me in the dark. 6.5 months old now. This reminds me of Clover. One of the porties that was in the video, she would bark. I don't know, Anne, if you're still on here, if you can let me know in chat if she still does that at night or dusk, whenever that was. Puppies can feel fear very, very young. Less now. Awesome. So I don't know if there's an exact age. I'd actually have to look up to see at what age do we know that they feel fear. We'd have to look at body language, and maybe when they're very, very young, they might be feeling fear in the litter, but you don't see the body language that we see in older dogs. I don't know. But certainly before 6.5 months, and fear is a normal reaction to things for all animals. So if something's freaking them out, you're going to see some fearful behavior. Luckily, she's out of her socialization period, right? And it usually ends, this is debatable, 16 to 20 weeks-ish. Who knows exactly when that period ends. So what I want to do is I want to figure out what's causing the fear. Is it because she can't see something? Dogs' vision is not like ours. They cannot see as well as we can. They can see better overall at dusk, right? So like dawn and dusk, it's not super bright, so the UV isn't just, you know, blowing out their vision. So she might either not be seeing something but knows it's there, smells it or hears it and is alerting to it, right? And reacting to either say, you stay over there, I know you're there, right? Or she might, you know, see it, right? And she just doesn't know what it is. So she also might be having just a secondary fear period. Again, these are, we don't know exactly what these are when they happen, but we get an inkling that there is kind of a secondary fear period that dogs work through. So as long as we're making sure to keep positive associations with things, like we continue socialization, right? We also work on counter conditioning those environments that we're seeing fear. So we want to make sure we're not overloading her with, well, we have to go outside, and every time we've gone outside in the mornings, you've been freaking out. So instead of going outside, I'm going to go maybe not as far and just watch her body language and be like, see, good things happen out here. You're not freaked out yet. If you look over to wherever, whatever's in the darkness, good girl, something good happens. If you go too far too fast, she's going to probably alert bark to whatever it is. And we don't want that to just reinforce itself. So I try to counter condition and really change the emotional response in that situation. And if you're consistent with that, usually see that fade out. But if not, then we really need to pinpoint what is it that's freaking her out, and then how do we set up some behavior modification sessions, like repetitions, to change that for her. So it's hard when you don't know exactly what it is. But name recognition is good if you can break her focus back to you. Good girl, right? Let's go back towards the house. You gotta go potty, good girl. Let's go back to the house. So just trying to reassure her and say, it's all good. No need to freak out. That's like a whole rabbit hole I could go down with you. Ooh, April has a great question. How about teaching jumping only on command? So yes, you can do this. Some people really like it when their dogs jump up to say hi. And that's fine. If that's what you want your dog to do, great. But make sure that you do put it on cue so that you give them either a hand signal like hop up, right? Give me a hug, whatever it is, so that they don't do it when they're not invited. Because dogs generalize things and they might be like, well, you're okay with me jumping on you. So how about this nice old lady that I see on the street who will probably not appreciate it, right? So make sure that you teach your dog, if I tell you it's okay, you can do this, right? Same with jumping on furniture. Like you're not allowed to just jump up. You have to be invited. So definitely you can put it on cue. It's pretty easy to get your dog to jump on you if you get excited enough. so it's an easy one to get on cue. I really recommend teaching a polite greeting first and then cueing the jump so that your dog knows this is what I usually do. And then I might get invited to jump up. Okay, so back to the sniffing, the puppy sniffing on the walk. What if trash is in the areas where we let our dog sniff? Then I wouldn't let him sniff there. This is what, it's hard because you can't control what's in certain places. So you can say walks are not for sniffing, which goes against a lot of enrichment. But if you do that, you need to make sure that you provide sniffing enrichment for your dog in safe context. So snuffle mats, a yard if you have it, to scatter things in the grass, have them sniff out. It's such an important sense for a dog, but if it's going to put them in danger, I don't allow them to do it where it could be dangerous, but I have to make sure I provide it somewhere else. Maybe consider walking in a different area, which might be hard depending on where it is. Or, you know, just really teaching the look at me. You can teach leave it, but again, puppies, especially that age, they're so fast. Like you don't even know they have something and then you're like, and then they swallow it, right? So I really like teaching them the proactive, preemptive, look at me while we walk past this part of the grass that has trash in it, until I can get you somewhere safe to sniff, and then go sniff. So I don't have anything more concrete for you as an alternative. Awesome, Donna. No, you're on the right track. So she's been redirecting Macy when she barks out the front door, come to another room. Awesome. When she comes to you, make it so she can't go right back, right? So build up some duration to that. So she barks, you redirect her, and she comes to you, she gets a treat. Okay, now go to mat and settle. And then I'm going to intermittently reward that. Or here's a bully stick, here's a stuffed Kong or a topple, something to reward you over here so that you don't immediately go right back to look out the door again. You can also pair that with, she looks towards the door before she runs back to bark. Yes, then a treat by you. So then she's like, okay, the door's fine. I can look at the door. Awesome, right? That's counter conditioning, where we teach them, instead of running and barking at something that might be freaking you out or alert barking, you can look and you're quiet, so I'm going to reward that. Right? So that can help build some duration for you too. Perfect. Oh, you're welcome, Jennifer. Awesome. Okay. Any other questions? If not, we can all go enjoy the rest of our evenings. I got to cook dinner for the puppers. Yeah. Awesome. I will send out resources in the email follow-up. It will take a little bit longer than usual. If you've been to other Yappy Hours, usually those go out really quick, but we're loading this up to YouTube. So I want to make sure everyone has that link as well. And then feel free to respond to that follow-up email with any questions you have. And then, hi, Rosie. And then please, I get so distracted by dogs on the screen. Make sure, please, to fill out our follow-up survey. It gives me an idea of what the next Yappy Hour topic should be. So if something's really driving you nuts and you're like, I'd love to talk to people and figure out what to do about it, let me know in that survey, and we can plan out next month's Yappy Hour. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. I will hang out for a couple more minutes here in case there's any last-minute questions. But otherwise, I hope to see you next month for our next Yappy Hour. Bye, guys.